Hi, welcome to the February 23rd, 2023. Oh, wow, two 2323s today. Inspiring Author Conversations. I'm Kathy Davis, Davis Creative Publishing Partners, and today we'll be speaking with Michael Fritzius about the third wave of podcasting. Before we welcome Fritz, I want to remind everybody of a few logistics. The call is being recorded. You'll receive a link to the YouTube, video within about 48 hours after the call. Your attendance at these meetings serves as your permission to be seen in the recordings. Please mute yourself on your end so as to avoid any background noises. Please find your chat button down at the bottom of your screen and type all of your questions into that. I'll be watching it and making sure that we get all your questions answered. And we promise to end the call around noon, 12:15, somewhere in there. Our theme for 2023 is growing your business by the book. Each month, we welcome guests who inspire authors by their knowledge, their new ideas, their opportunities, and wisdom. So please help me welcome Fritzius. He is a multipreneur who has figured out how to take individual skills and combine them to bless people in exciting and new ways. Podcastify.me is one such endeavor. He's found a way to use the power of the podcast to help business owners, particularly coaches, build a deep rapport with guests and listeners, the kind of rapport that turns people into clients later. Welcome, Fritz. Glad you could make it today.
I'm glad I could make it too. Thanks for having me.
We were talking earlier about your custom studio that you're in.
Yeah, Studio 150. Yeah, and it's a truck.
I'm guessing it's a Ford 150.
It is. It is.
Okay, I wondered if that was.
Yeah. Well, the actual car that we get the most mileage out of is a Honda Odyssey. Like we can fit all six of us in here, but it's cozy and it's
Yeah.
like, well, I need a quiet spot because we homeschool, so the girls are all in there doing different things, playing
So this is your
piano.
space. This is like the man cave.
This is my man cave. And
Yeah.
seriously, when we moved out here to High Ridge, we bought this property and there was like an outbuilding and it's like it's got a basement. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna turn it into a mad scientist laboratory. I'm gonna put all kinds of stuff out there. This is gonna be my man cave. We use it for storage. Yeah, this is it. This is my man cave.
I
I
love
like it
that.
out here. It's
Well,
fun.
and the fact that it has dual purpose because you can use it as a podcast studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, if I want to do what you do and sit in my truck and do a podcast, where do I start?
Do you have a truck?
No, I have
Oh.
like a Toyota Highlander.
Oh.
I could use it too. Yeah.
You could use it. You could use it. Well, what I would say is where you would start has a lot more to do with who you want to have be on your show and who you want to have listen to your show. I always focus on the audience and guest pool first. So before you purchase a microphone, before you try to figure out the logistics, what software to buy, it's like stop, just think first about who it is that you're building this for. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be building a podcast for people. And the approach that I take is what kinds of people would be most likely first to become clients later. There's probably a high concentration of those people out there. And if you know where to look and create the kind of environment that attracts those people, then you're going to be way ahead of the game. You'll be way more ahead of the game than what I was when I first started. I just hit record and started opining on things, and that did not work. I didn't have a plan. I'm not one to plan, but starting off like that, and it's like, how come this isn't working? Why am I not getting results? Well, because you didn't plan with an audience and with a listenership and a specific kind of guest in mind. So that would be where I would first start. If you're thinking
Know
about
your
starting a
audience.
podcast, know your audience.
Know your audience.
Exactly.
And then how do we figure out what we're going to talk about?
Oh, it's gonna resonate with who you are as a person, right? So when I'm podcasting, for example, I like to talk about the art of podcasting itself, but also the art of communication, the art of rapport building. And I want that to show up when I have people on my show. If I have a coach or I have an entrepreneur or a multipreneur, everybody's got a story. And for me, what really resonates is that deep bond, that building that connection. I took a Clifton Strengths Assessment a while back, and my interpersonal skills were like top of the stack. It's like this person likes people. It's like, well, I kind of knew that about myself already, but seeing it on a form really, really clinched it, really brought it together. The topics that you come up with are something that's going to really thrum deeply. It's going to strike a chord in you. It's going to harmonize with other people. And that goes back also to what it is that forms your target audience. That's going to attract a certain kind of person. It's going to attract a certain kind of energy. Everybody in this call today has a certain kind of person that they just really get along with, real good friends
Mm.
that you would just anytime if they said, "Hey, you want to get a coffee? You want to grab a sandwich? You want to go to Breadco?" Absolutely. I want to do that. Let's do it. There's a reason why you get along with those people. You connect. Your hearts are knit together on a very basic level. So figure out yourself. If you know yourself very well, the topics that would best fit on a podcast are going to really dive deep and highlight all of the facets about you.
So quite often when we work with our authors, we talk about their brand and their author platform being the same. The brand platform and their author platform is pretty much the same in that they're who their audience is and what kind of we ask them what kind of need are they filling for their audience. So is that kind of a similar thing here? What is it the audience is looking for that maybe nobody else is doing? What's the gap that they could fill? Is that kind of a similar conversation that you would have with someone helping them to start a podcast?
It is, and particularly if I'm talking with authors, there's the concept of love languages, the five love
Mm-hmm.
languages. There's physical touch, words of affirmation, gifts, time, that kind of thing. Um, the way that authors bring about a book, for example, they're basically extracting part of their soul and they're putting it in written form. I think we all agree on that. It's an extension of yourself. You're getting your thoughts out there in a tactile way that people can read.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way that people can consume information. Another way that people can consume information is a podcast. And there are multiple ways, right? Some people really like books. Some people love reading books. They're voracious readers. Some people don't. Some people may listen to audiobooks, but they also would be more likely to listen to a podcast, or they'd be on social media, or they read articles, or they read blog posts, whatever it is. Everybody's got a particular love language as far as how they ingest data. How, like, what's the inroad for this particular person so that I can impact them? If it's not a book that they're going to consume, and it might be a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we talk about how they can use our authors will use their book as a marketing tool. So it's very similar vein with the podcast. And can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure can. It Podcast is an amazing marketing tool. I would say, I would dare say that treating it just as a marketing tool is kind of, it's not old school thinking.
Mhm.
It's just that's the previous way that people would think about it. They would say, that's an amazing source of content. It is. They're not wrong.
Mhm.
It's a great source of content. You can get it out there just like you can get a book or a TikTok or YouTube video. I mean, there's ways to consume content, but don't stop there. Don't stop at just treating it as a marketing tool. Treat it as a way to create a community around yourself, a community of
Love
diehard
that.
fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what
So,
you're referring to when you talk about the third wave of podcasting?
yes, that's absolutely it. And it's fairly new. There are some people that are going full bore into this. I mean, I'm one of them, but
Mhm.
I'm seeing it more, and it's starting to kind of turn the bend a little bit. We're seeing it more as a way to just develop a really deep, tightly knit community around a person. And previously, what people would think was, well, if I want to build a podcast, the way to be successful is to get a bajillion downloads a day like 100,000 downloads a day
Mhm.
and get like these fat sponsorships from people that want to have access to all those yummy ear holes. That sounds weird saying that. Yummy ear holes. Who writes this stuff? But that's not the only way to do it. The people that are actively listening and partaking in your show, if they're diehard fans, they're going to want to support you. You're probably going to know them by name. You probably know them already
Mhm.
on a first name basis, but they're willing to financially support you. You don't have to rely on huge listenership, pulling big numbers, gaming algorithms. It's like the people that like you for you, they're going to support you. That's the third wave.
The what else about podcasting is, so if I'm new, like I'll use myself as the example. I'm very comfortable with Zoom. It's been a really big made a big impact on our business and created our community for us. And that reminds me that over the last 3 years, when we've all been looking for new ways to do things under quarantine and the pandemic, one of the things that came out of that was a study that said that people miss two things more specifically than anything else. One was they feel that they have lost hope and they've lost their community. So one of the things we talk about with our authors, and you just mentioned the community part, was how can you build that community? And how do you get people, one, to know about your podcast, and then how do you get them to start listening? Because, and then I'll throw another statistic at you. I'll let you answer that one first.
All right. So, how to get people to know about it first, and how do you get them to listen? And at first, it's going to be a lot of word of mouth. We all probably know at least 100 people that we could email and say, hey, I'm getting ready to start a podcast. And either you'd like to have them on as a guest, or you just want to let them know. I'd really appreciate your support if you could give it a couple listens, maybe, rate it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whatever, but give them a
And
clear
you're,
call to
are
action.
you using social media for this?
Me personally, I do a
Uh-huh.
lot of email. I communicate
Okay.
via email. That one-to-one interaction, I like doing that. Like I
Mm-hmm.
could use social media a lot more, but for me, it's like my first, kind of a side tangent here. My first thing is if I'm going to build a relationship with somebody, is I'm going to get them off platform as quick as possible. I want to have either an email or a Zoom call one-to-one, or I'm going to have a phone call. I use a telephone. I'm old school, but just some way to build that relationship because the relationships build a lot quicker. So to let people know about your podcast, there's a lot of that one-to-one interaction. Just let people know. Let them know what you're doing. It's a good excuse to stay in touch. Just let them know, right? Um, get them to take action, get them to possibly be a guest on your show. And what I do a lot of times is if I have a guest on my show and the conversation goes really, really well, then two things are going to happen. One, I'm going to ask them, hey, do you know some other people that might want to also be a guest on the show? They probably run around with a lot of similar, birds of a feather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll say, well, yeah. I mean, because if I like the conversation, there's a pretty good chance they did too. I'm getting to be a decent read of people. And they'll say, yeah, I got 2 or 3 people. I'm going to send them over. Okay, awesome. So if I do that with every single guest, then theoretically I could have between 1 and 3 extra people on my show that I didn't have to do any work. They already know, they've built a relationship, they trust me. The second thing is I make it really easy for them to share about the show that they were just on. Okay. And what I do a lot of times is I have a little piece of software that I wrote because I'm a huge automation nerd,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll pull 30-second slugs out, and it'll make a spiffy little audiogram with the little wavy things on there, and I pull out the 3 best of those, and I say, hey, I want to make this easy for you, but I would love if you would please share this on your social media. Here are 3 teasers. Here's a blurb. You don't have to use it. It's just we're trying to write it in first person as much as possible. Like if this person would have said this, here's what they would have said. We want to make it as easy for them as possible. Just paste that in, use a teaser, share it on LinkedIn, share it on Facebook, wherever
Mm-hmm.
they are. Makes it super, super easy. And what you'll find is it takes a little bit of time, but you'll start to build your listenership, and it's going to contain mostly people that really resonate with what you're all about. It's not just puffing up the numbers to say, I got 10,000 listens today. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're getting maybe a few dozen listens or maybe a few hundred listens, but they're people that genuinely want to hear what you have to say on a topic. They either want to learn something or they want to be entertained or both. They're coming to you for you. That's when the magic happens.
Yeah. We've got a great question because I know we have a couple of children's book authors at least on here. What's the average length of a podcast if I'm using it to promote a children's books?
That's a good question. I'm gonna say, I mean, on average, the length of a good podcast, it really is gonna hinge on the attention span of your audience. The people that I usually speak to, 30 minutes is pretty good. Now, if you're promoting children's books to kids, then maybe the attention span is less. If you're, I guess if you're putting together a show and you want to talk about a quick book, maybe it's like a reading rainbow style thing. Uh, he never really talked for more than a couple minutes about a particular book, but it's just enough to wet the kid's whistle and
Mhm,
have them say, "Mom, Dad, I would get this book. It looks freaking awesome." Well, then how long do you need in order to promote that book?
mhm.
And you can have like little bitty, like 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute clips or whatever, and make it really attractive to the kids. But again, it hinges on who the target audience is. If it's kids, much smaller, 1 to 3 minutes. If it's big kids like me, 42 years old, 30 minutes is good.
The other statistic that came out last year was that the 30 parents, and it doesn't matter, I guess young parents all the way up, have been showing a trend that they are buying more books based upon the mission or the purpose of that author rather than the content in the book. So they're
Right.
buying children's books based upon what's the bigger story behind the book, or what is this author's platform, and they may have several books of a similar vein that kind of all apply to this world mission that they've decided. Do you see that in podcasts too?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you gave me an excuse to go back to something you said before. When I got started podcasting, I kicked off my journey in July 2019. So 7 months BC before COVID. So I was
Mm-hmm.
able to see on both sides what it was like. And when I first got started, it's like, yeah, podcasting's a thing, but in the middle of the pandemic, holy moly, people opened up and it was amazingly easy to build rapport because people were
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable. None of us were
Mm-hmm.
invulnerable. Everybody was like, man, life really sucks right now. Everybody's going through it. And if you ask them how they're doing, they'll tell you, right? It's like, oh, this is really hard. I just lost my job. And before they would be like, living the dream, buddy. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. But going back to what you said, also, people very much want to have that deep feeling of belonging, of being part of a thing larger than themselves. And so I think that does lend itself well to the statistic you said.
Mm-hmm.
People want to connect with the author. They want to get behind that author's mission. It's like, yeah, they wrote a book and it's a great book and I loved reading it, but I want to know the person. I want to buy more of their books because I want to support them.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in their philanthropic goals if they have any, but I want to get behind them and support them as a person. I'm less in buying books for me and what I get out of it, but I want to contribute to them. So yeah, that
Yeah.
trend that holds true, and you see it with podcasting as well. It's been weird. The last like 3 or 4 years have
Yeah.
been weird with podcasting. It's just flipped.
Well, and I have another stat to throw out and ask if you feel it has affected podcasting. And that there was a study that showed we've all become super multitaskers.
Mhm.
And this came up in an article about audiobooks because what's happened is that ebook sales have gone down and audiobooks have gone up. And audio podcasting is kind of, to me, same medium, so to
Mhm.
speak, that you can listen with a pair of headset while you're doing dishes and watching the kids, make sure they don't jump out of the house, those kinds of things. Do you see that contributing to the popularity of podcasts?
I sure do. I sure do. That's actually one of the selling points I use is it's one of the few forms of media that you can consume while doing other things. Even TikTok, popular as it is, you have to use your eyes, ears, and your thumbs. That's like three organs, right? It's like, well, if you've got headphones or you've got earbuds, that's all you need for any
Mm-hmm.
audio only show. And the cool part of it is the reason why the popularity has increased, I think, is the amount of influence that a podcaster has. Like, think about it. If you're listening to a show, you're probably not going to be like, I'm going to listen to this one show while I'm doing emails, and then I'm going to physically stop listening
Mm-hmm.
after I'm done. You're probably going to keep listening. You're probably going to get like two or three more episodes snuck into your subconscious before you realize
Mm-hmm.
it. And then you're like, man, my ears are just kind of itching. I got to get these earbuds out of here. Like, that's the reason you stop listening. It's not because of the quality of the content. But in
Yeah.
that amount of time, and if you're listening to like a 30-minute episode, that's like 2 hours of content that you
Yeah.
get. Like, you're not getting that with any other form of
Mm-hmm.
media. You're not.
That's awesome. I've got a great question from Shelley. Hi, Shelley. Thanks for joining us today. She wants to know, how do I ask my followers to financially support me? How do we monetize this thing? Those are my words. She currently has a live stream that she's turning into a podcast.
Well, so that's a great question, and that's one that comes up a lot, especially with our clients. So there's a psychological aspect and there's a logistical aspect to it. Logistically, you could start with something as simple as a PayPal subscription, or there's all kinds of other tools. I'm having a brain fart right now. What's the one that everybody seems to use all the time? There's like
Venmo?
there's Venmo, but it's specifically for Patreon. There it is.
Oh.
Took me a little bit. You can set up a Patreon and set it up for like $10 a month.
Mm-hmm.
But the psychological aspect is, if you've got an audience of listeners and some of them are people that you personally know, you can just ask them, just point blank ask them. They've known you the longest. They like
Mm-hmm.
you. They know you. They trust you. Just ask them if they would support you for like 10 or $20 a month or something like that. And worst they can do is say no, but they can also say yes. I try not to focus on the negative. But
Yeah.
then the other part is, if you've got a live stream and you're wanting to turn it into a podcast, put the ask in the middle somewhere and just let people know, hey, if you like this show, I'd really appreciate your support. It costs a lot of gerbil food to keep them running on the hamster wheels and keep this going. Like, be funny, right? But just kind of lay it out. It's like, we all know we live in a capitalist society, right? We all know we need money at the end of the day. And $10 a month from one person is not a big lift. $20 a month from a person is not a big lift, but 10's even less.
And I've
So
seen one person say, if you'd like to buy me a cup of coffee from Starbucks, that's $10. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Are there
yeah,
other ways to monetize your podcast?
there are. If you happen to be in a business where you are trading knowledge for dollars, then the podcast can be treated as sort of a middle of funnel thing. Like, top of funnel is social media. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Not everybody's going to find or fit in the funnel, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the middle of the funnel is the people that have at least opted in to listen to an episode or to be a guest on the episode. And of those two demographics, if you take it a step further and you invite them even further into the ecosystem, then that's where you have them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You maybe have, let's have a free consultation, or let's have a real simple course. Like, I've got a course if you want to learn how to, talk gooder in your writing or something, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
$47 one time. Do it at your own pace.
Mm-hmm.
If you want access to a library of content, then that's a monthly membership. If you want access to me personally in a group setting, that costs this much. If you want
Yeah.
access to me one on one, golden ticket, I charge, but it's a little bit more.
A lot of
It,
coaches. That's a good scalable plan for coaches and consultants.
right.
Yeah, I did recently meet a podcaster out of Tampa who has a very niche market, and he's now charging his guests to come on his podcast. Do you see that a lot? Is that a new trend?
It's not a new trend, but it does
Mm-hmm.
take a lot of momentum to get there, because if they're charging, the guest is probably going to think, well, what's in it for me? I mean, you got to get clear on that. If the what's in it for me is I get to talk with this person, then okay. I mean, they're probably getting a lot out of it. Maybe if the conversation, and I don't know what the topic is, um, if the conversation is one where it's almost like a coaching session, then yeah, I would expect that if you're really good at coaching, you can charge. It isn't a free coaching session. You're going
Mm-hmm.
to get some actionable tips out of there, right? It's just also going to be a podcast.
Yeah.
If the other part is, well, if the what's in it for me is I'm going to get access to a bunch of people that are listening to this show, and I'm going to be able to highlight myself, my business, my goals, my plans, my dreams, then you're basically paying for advertisement space.
Yeah.
But you either got to be like super awesome, like you've either got to be Tony Robbins, or
Mm-hmm.
you have to have those huge numbers that we were talking about before. So for the people that are starting a podcast or thinking about it, it's like that's a good goal to get to. You got to really push far, and it's going to take a while to get
Mm-hmm.
that return. You can get return on things earlier and have that be an end goal further down the line.
So if I'm on the call today and now I'm all excited thinking, okay, this is something I can do. I know my audience, I know what they're looking for. What kind of equipment do I need? I mean, I have heard of a former TV announcer here in St. Louis who runs her podcast out of her coat closet at home.
Yep.
So what kind of equipment do I need and what do I really don't have to worry about if I want to jump in?
If you want to jump in, my advice would be start with an audio only podcast. And you can get away with a laptop, which I'm sure most people have, and Zoom. You don't even need a Zoom subscription. If you can keep your episode to under 30 minutes before Zoom gives you the boot, because it'll kick you out at 40, very unscrupulously, like mid sentence, boom, it's done. It doesn't care. It's cold, unfeeling technology. But free Zoom account, uh, you don't need to have an external camera, although it does help if you're having guests on. It makes you look a little more put together. Like I have a
Mhm.
fairly simple, this is a USB camera. It's a high def camera, but they're like $30. You can get them on Amazon. I'd show you, but I can't really show you my camera because
Right.
it's showing,
Because,
right. Can't take a selfie with itself, right?
right.
Um, but the thing to put high priority on is the audio quality. And the person that you're talking about before, who does it in the coat closet, has the right idea. You want to make sure to minimize as much external noise as possible. And doing it in a coat closet is great. It's an awesome conversation starter. And I had a conversation with a guy one time. His name is Sid Masand. He's the host of Rock and Roll True Stories. And I didn't know where he was going to be, and he didn't know where I was going to be. I fired up my camera. I'm in a car. He's in a closet. He's got sweaters and things hanging around his ears. It's well lit, but it's like,
Uh-huh.
dude, we sound freaking amazing together. People would think we're in a studio and we're not, because he's in like California somewhere and I'm in St. Louis and I'm in a truck. He's in a coat closet. I'm like, dude, that's so cool. He's like, it's a great conversation starter too. See, it's working. Um, but yeah, the audio quality is good, but also the microphone. And I have here a Blue Yeti, which is a fairly standard. If you get deeper into podcasting, you might want to invest in something a little bit better. But this thing's a workhorse, and they cost about 120, $130
Mm-hmm.
max. And you don't have to have anything super special, just as long as the audio quality sounds good. Because if you've got awful audio, like the people that aren't seeing you but are hearing you, they're going to be like, it's like grating on my ear holes. I don't want to listen to this person. It's like they got good stuff to say, but I just can't handle talking, listening to them. So remove all the obstacles to making people not want to listen to you. But you can start on a budget. Probably got 80 to 90% of the stuff you need already.
Well, and it reminds me that there's that one car dealer here in St. Louis. He's in it. You've probably heard the TV commercials. He uses his kids. They all have conversations, and now his kids are at college. And the sound on those commercials is horrible. But
Hmm.
they must be pulling in the money because he's still doing them.
Yeah.
He's what is that? Glendale Jeep or something. I think they sell Jeep
Yeah.
products. But
Yeah. I
he's
can't remember the last time I saw one of those. Is it like really echoey or something? Like,
and it's like, you're in a big tunnel and it's real echoey. Lots of
yeah.
air, kind of feels like there's a lot of air.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't start a podcast. Don't start it in like a tiled bathroom. Not a good environment. You want to have nice soft surfaces to catch all that extra sound. Yeah.
And then how do I figure out, like, do I have to have a special software? So like today, we're recording on Zoom, and I know I'll have a recording after that because I did hit record today. And then what do I do with it? Who do I give it to? How do I get it out there into, and you don't have to give us details step by step, because I know that's your business, but kind of give us a quick, 2 or 3 step synopsis.
I was going to say, just hire me and just give it to me and I'll
Yeah.
take care of it,
Yeah.
right? But Anchor is a really good platform. It's free. Do
Can you spell that?
yeah, Anchor, ANCHOR
Okay.
.FM, like a boat anchor.
Uh-huh.
And Anchor's job is it's a content distribution network. So what that means is you put your podcast up on Anchor and it's responsible for distributing it to Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
Okay.
Breaker, Stitcher. Like, it does, if you've got accounts on all those different platforms, it's like, I got this, and it goes and it spreads it out all over the place. So you don't have to. It gets you a lot more listenership because some people will listen to a podcast on one platform, but they aren't on another one. Some
Mm-hmm.
people are on Apple Podcasts and they don't touch Spotify. Well, if you're on both, you got them. But once you get it out there, then you have a set place that you can direct people to. Hey, if you want to go hear this podcast, come on over to anchor.fm/my cool podcast or whatever you want to call it. And that becomes where people go hear each episode. And when they start listening to one, they might just keep listening to multiple ones.
Now, so I know, like with Audible, there's certain quality criteria, and we have to use a sound engineer, and Audible has a habit of kicking out your recording just because they don't like it. Are there that kind of gatekeepers with Anchor or Spotify or Apple? How does that work?
The only gatekeeper that I've run into is if you're using custom music. And this is a really niche
Yeah.
one-off thing, but I have custom music. So whenever we build a podcast for somebody, we give them the option. Would you like to have your own custom track made? Like you own the rights to it. It's your music. And if
Mm-hmm.
they say yes, then I put Drew on the case and Drew smashes out some awesome beats for this person. But what we do a lot of times is when we start up a podcast and we just need to have a placeholder episode, we'll we got to put something there um, just to kind of hold the place
Mm-hmm.
on the show and so that we can configure some other stuff on the back end because it won't let you set up Spotify link. It won't let you set up all these other links until you have an actual episode. It's like, well, we just put the sound in there. Well, Anchor will say, hey, we're not a music distribution platform, and so we're going to delete your podcast. I found this out the hard way. Fortunately, there weren't any actual episodes. And we're like, guys, we're not trying to use it as a music distro platform. We just needed to put our foot in the door here so we can do some other stuff. Can you reinstate the account? And they're like, no. I'm like, fine. So we just made a new one, whatever. But they have in-house music there anyway. It doesn't have to be. It can just be a fake like ding sound that they have in their library. Just put
Mm-hmm.
that in there and just call it placeholder episode. But yeah, they don't kick out audio if it's low quality, if it's got gaps in it or anything like that. It can be rough. They don't care. It's audio. So yeah, the audiobooks, and I didn't know that they had gatekeepers for that, but as far as a podcast is concerned, you can get away with a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
than Audible sounds like.
That's awesome. And so someone's asking for your contact information, and I will remind everybody that you will get a follow-up email, which has a link to this recording and Michael's contact information, as well as he'll be telling us about a free gift that he has for everybody here shortly.
Yes.
And so who do you see, what topics do you talk about in your podcast?
For mine, I like to talk with coaches, with entrepreneurs, and we really dig deep into what is it that got you on the path. I love talking with entrepreneurs. I wasn't raised around them very much. Like my granddad was in marketing and advertising. So we had samples and coasters and gewgaws and gadgets all over the place. But I never really knew what he did. He ran his own business, but I never saw him working. And my dad took a run at being an entrepreneur and it worked okay. But now that I'm on the path, it's like there's some really cool stories that cause people to want to start their own business, to really say, you know what, I'm gonna solve this problem that I see in the world. I might be the only person that sees it, but by God, I'm gonna do something about it. And I get on the show and I talk with them and I give them a chance to just unpack and be like, man, it's been a long time since I thought about that. Like, I'm like, right, you've been on the path for a bit and you
Mm-hmm.
get to go back and see how far you've come. We're both doing it together. But the results of it is I build some amazing relationships and I give them the ability to share what they do with their business. Who
Yeah.
do they serve? What are their best clients like? It's a marketing thing for
Mm-hmm.
them. But yeah, it's fun stuff.
Yeah, I want to remind everybody we're closing in on the tail end of our conversation with Fritz today. And if you have any questions, make sure you get them in the chat box. We'll make sure we get them answered. And do you foresee a fourth wave of podcasting? And if so, what might that be?
Huh. Well,
And
if I was gonna say if the people that have their way with Chat GPT, I think there might be some AI specific ones coming. I was thinking about that the other day and I'm like, that would be kind of corny to do something like that, but I mean, we're at a point now where somebody could start up a show and basically have like two robots talking to each other.
yeah,
You know,
you
it's
give them a
procedurally
topic and
generated
let them
text.
go. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there's old technology that's around that's like you give them a block of text and say, hey, read this to me in the best approximation of a human voice you've got. You can do it and you could
Hmm.
stitch it together, make a podcast. You don't have to lift a finger. Uh, so I don't know. I think there might be a huge glut of podcasts coming out that are really low quality.
Yeah.
But as that firms up, I think it's going to come back to the how do we build relationships quickly?
Well, and I saw that happen with self-published books on Amazon, and they eventually die out because there was a process where people would buy these really cheaply produced books and realize that the author can't really write, and the book's
Right.
not worth reading, and eventually they just kind of faded themselves out because no one was buying them.
Hmm.
And we've got a great question here from Pat Dana. How often should one post a podcast? Once a week, 2 weeks, once a month? How do you figure that part out?
I would say once a week, once a week. So if you think further out, that's going to be, 50 to 52 weeks a year. That's a good amount of podcasts, right?
Mhm.
But you don't have to think of it as, oh, every week I got to get up, time to make the donuts. Like you can do a bunch of podcast episodes and schedule them to go out once a week. Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Central. Be there for
Yeah.
the Pat Dana show. And it's like you maybe spend like 2 hours a month banging out this content, but bing, 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 bing. And then you can focus on other things for the rest of the
Mhm.
month. So it's easy to get like a once a week. Like if you limit your show length to 30 minutes, it's one 30-minute conversation a week times
Well, and
four.
it reminds me a lot of, because that's exactly what we used to tell people when they were starting an e-newsletter.
Mhm.
Don't overdo it. Start with once a month. You get happy with that. Go to, twice a month and then get to one a week. And ideally that one a week was a good spot to be. So this is
Right.
just another way to keep in contact with your community and put
Yeah,
that out there.
it is. And the consistency is key too. But yeah, it's the pacing. Like
Mhm.
for a while, I was doing one a day, but I was banging
Wow.
out like 5 or 6 a week also. So I mean, I
Mhm.
could do it, but yeah, just it's what you can handle.
Mhm. So tell me a little bit about this gift that you have for our guests today.
Cool. I've got two gifts actually, because I thought of another one. So the first one is anybody who wants to is more than welcome to join me as a guest on my show. I was going to give that anyway, and
Mhm.
there's just some really cool conversations that we can have, and I'll send Kathy, I'll send you some information about that so you can include it in the outbound email.
Okay.
But the other gift that I've got is if somebody here is thinking about, I think I might want to start a podcast at some point, maybe not right this second, but sometime, then I've actually got a mini strategy session that I have available, which I'll also send Kathy some information about that. But it's a 30-minute call. And what we'll do is we'll get in, I'll learn about you as quick as I can, like hurry, and then let's talk about like what kinds of people do you want to be in contact with more.
Mhm.
And then I'll come back later and say, okay, let's say we had a podcast. Here's how it would be structured. Here's what it would look like. And here's how you can get the best benefit out of it. So, free gift. I love sharing my insights with people, and not in a look how smart I am kind of way. It's like, no, I've learned some really cool stuff over the years.
Yeah,
This is how I give back.
there's value in experience, let me tell you.
There is. I'm finally
Yeah,
giving myself permission to like share that.
yeah.
Used to be nobody wants to hear from me. It's like, no, that's a big fat lie. People like
Well,
me.
yeah, I mean, and that was a big lesson, positive lesson for me also when after the quarantine or during the quarantine, is that if you can't do anything else, just give something.
Yeah.
And give time, give an idea, and because ideas are free.
Yeah.
But so I want to thank you very much for being our guest today. And I do want to remind everybody that you will get Fritz's contact information on the follow-up email. And even though you are located here in the St. Louis area, because I know we have guests from all across time zones here today, you're easily accessible because you're right in the middle of everything. That's what I always tell people, right
That's
here in the
right.
middle of the US.
Yep.
And I do want to remind everybody also that we'll be meeting again on Thursday, March 9th, 11:30 a.m. Central. We'll be talking with Kristen Spencer about business growth through storytelling. You mentioned the word storytelling earlier in our talk today, so it's a big theme. Everybody has a story, and wisdom not shared is wisdom lost forever. That's what I believe.
That's right.
Thank you, Fritz, very much for being here. I know I learned a lot today. I'm sure everybody did too. And thank you so much for being here. We'll see everybody in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fritz. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.